Let's say that you're playing a game that somebody had recommended to you, and when you're playing it, you hate it. It's not that the idea was bad, it's just something about it doesn't click. This indie developer sent me their game so I could give them feedback, but while I played it, nothing was clicking. In fact, there was so much friction that I didn't even realize that this game was trying to tell a very emotional story. So first, we'll walk through those first impressions. Then we'll see what the developer was actually trying to do. My name is Devon. This is Games Over Qualia. Today we're talking about a game called Enemies Within. So this game is described as a 2D Metroidvania kind of action platformer. First off, positives, I really like the originality of this game. I also like the sense of humor. I think the humor in this game is hilarious. I really like it. I like the first little part where you're walking and you see the giant corporation building. I love the dialogue between the people. This game is where you play as two stick figures, a black one and a white one. You play as both of them at the same time. It's like one character that you're playing as. It's just two people. You walk around in a territory and you try to defeat enemies. And I haven't gotten past the first boss. The game is fairly approachable for people who understand what a 2D platformer is, but the game doesn't feel like it functions well. The mechanics in this game don't feel tuned. They don't feel responsive. The game is meant to be played on the keyboard, which is very strange. It's like a wall jumping type of game. It's a game that you need to do platforming, and there's combat, and there's a lot of maneuvering involved. So playing that on the keyboard is very difficult. I went ahead and I mapped my keys to the controller using the Steam, map. It felt so much better. I mean, so much better as in it was easier for me to press the keys in the way that I wanted to press them, but the game remained difficult. I think there's two ways to look at difficulty when it comes to games. The first way, the game is just very challenging, right? There's a lot of things to overcome, but you have all the tools necessary, right, to overcome those things. The other way is that it's very hard to use the tools available, and then you're challenged on the mastery of those tools. This game is the latter, where it feels like, to me, I'm not grasping these tools enough to where I'm able to master them. It feels like there's a conflict here. When you first begin this kind of combat, in this funny little moment where one of the dragonfly-looking things tells you press A to ascend, and instead of ascending, you attack and you kill him, which is kind of funny. When you attack in this game, the animation is a pretty slow animation. And what's weird about that is that the way that you attack enemies in here seems to demand more than that. It seems to demand that you need to be faster. And the reason why I think about that is because when you see this room where you have a bunch of enemies here, when they come at you, they're moving fairly fast. There's a little bit of telegraphing, but they're moving fairly fast. It seems to require the player to react. And when you react, you have to do something, and usually it's a dodge, but in this game I don't think there is a way to dodge. The only way to dodge that I can find out is by jumping, and I didn't know for the longest time in this game that there's different ways to attack. A fair warning, this game is very early in development, or so it seems, because on the Steam page it says 2028 release date, so all these things that I'm saying, it could be completely changed by the time I'm done talking about it. I don't know how much of this is just early development, and I don't know how much of this is meant to be in the game the way it is now. I didn't know there was any other way to attack in this game until I had accidentally pressed one of these buttons while pressing a direction, and then I saw that something happened, some other animation. So I tried it again, and I started experimenting with a bunch of different directions and the same button, and I found out there's a bunch of different ways to attack, which I was like, oh wow, that would have been very helpful. But still, even with those attacks, they still feel rather slow, or at least the first one does. And they don't necessarily need to be fast. It just feels like if we're going to have a slow attack, that we should use it in a way that fast attacking would not be beneficial. For example, if you think about Castlevania or the NES, in the very beginning at least, the enemies don't go at you really fast, right? You have these ghoul-looking dudes that walk, and they walk at varied speeds, but usually they're pretty slow, enough to where you can feel how slow your whip is at first, and then you can try it, a few times on a bunch of different enemies until you get the hang of it, and now you can strategize the way that you attack. So with that, if there's ever an enemy that's coming at you really, really fast, then you know to start attacking sooner. When you try to attack the ghouls, you can feel how slow your whip is for sure, but when you do it, you have enough reach to get to the ghouls. In Enemies Within, it doesn't feel like you have much reach at all. Even though you can feel how slow your attack is, it doesn't feel like the game is taking that into consideration, especially since these first monsters are jumping at you. The first time that you attack in this game, you're attacking in this room that's symmetrical, so it feels as if it's meant to be played as an arena-styled game where every part is equal. This type of level design I see a lot in things like Super Smash Bros., where those types of maneuvering, where maneuvering very quickly is part of the process. And though you can wall jump pretty quickly and you can jump quickly in this game, you can't attack very quickly. And so it seems like it's antithetical to the type of combat that we're expecting. That being said, that was the biggest challenge that I had with the game, was just interacting with it at first. Once I kind of got the hang of things and I started to play it more, and it took several times for me to get better at this game, to grow into these tools, because they never felt intuitive. After doing all that stuff and getting through the platforming area, which the platforming area seemed way easy compared to all those other things. Like, I beat the whole platforming area in one try, as opposed to all those combat things where it took me several tries. And I think what that says isn't necessarily that I'm just better at platforming than I am with combat. I would say that the mechanics in this game are more suited for platforming as opposed to combat. So I never saw how much damage I was taking during the game. It feels like I can just take, I think, around 6 hits. All I can tell is by the different colors that your player changes. I never knew how close I was to death. I know that my character turns, I think, yellow and then red. It would be much easier with like a health bar or something like that. But speaking of health bars, the boss, I had no idea how much damage I was doing to the boss, because it took so many times hitting this eyeball, which I love the way the boss is animated, and I like how goofy and weird it is. I think that's really cool. As far as attacking him, it was very strange, because I would attack maybe once or twice using my little slash, unless I was doing the down A attack, which attacked a lot more. But when I did that, it felt like it took something like... It felt like it just went on and on and on, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was actually not doing any damage to him, because I was thinking, well, eventually something's got to happen. He has a second form, and that form is way more difficult, to the point where you have to memorize like where he's going to attack, and all of these, like the way that it's animated and the way that the hitbox detection works is so odd to me. It feels like getting hit is inevitable. Of course, it only feels that way because I have not memorized where all these things are, but it doesn't feel like it's fair in this respect. And I like the idea that this boss gets like suddenly extremely difficult, and I think that would be really cool if the mechanics felt well tuned. You know, that something like this would feel good in something like Dead Cells, for example. I know when I play bosses that are like absurd in Dead Cells, it feels okay, because Dead Cells has very, very tuned mechanics. And this one doesn't feel like it has tuned mechanics. And maybe there's a way to dodge, and I just don't know it. As far as the controls are concerned, nothing was explained within the game other than how to attack just by pressing A. I know the mechanics in here are very early, and they're not finely tuned yet, so it feels like a lot of things are broken. And because of that, it feels like the tools that I have, I'm not able to engage with the core game loop just yet. And it feels like what I'm doing here is much too early. Like, it feels like we're still in the conceptual phase. And the reason why I say that is because, like, even the very beginning, when you drop down this tunnel, you can use the wall jump to go right back up the tunnel. So those were my first impressions. Let's now look at the dev's intentions. So every time a developer submits a game, they answer some questions before they submit it. So we're going to talk about some of their answers. This first question was, what were you hoping the player would feel while playing your game? This dev answered, by the end of the established game loop, I wanted the player to feel like they have gone through the process of confronting and overcoming trauma. To achieve this, I am hoping the player feels safe and curious in the first town and slowly strip away from the feeling of safety as they explore the cave. I want the cave boss fight to be the climax, which provides a struggle the player must overcome to progress. Although I want the player to be able to relax a little after the boss fight, I also want the player to feel a sense of unease throughout the entire next section. I hope that this sense of unease will then be lifted in the hub area, where the player unlocks a new ability and regains the abilities that were lost. Hey, this is an amazing answer. Thank you so much for that awesome answer. Really, really, really good. Question number 2 was, why did you choose this experience? This dev answered, my intent is to showcase the processing of various kinds of inner turmoil, including the process of secondhand turmoil that comes from helping others processing through their own turmoil. I hope to build levels and boss fights around inner turmoil such as despair, anxiety, and grief. I'm excited for this experience because I want to tell the story that I feel like a lot of people are feeling at this time in a way that's entertaining. I feel like a lot of people struggle with mental health and that there are a lot of people out there preying on the people with these struggles. I feel like we often decouple mental health issues from those in power, attempting to take advantage of people who are struggling. So I hope to cleanly connect these concepts as the game progresses. When I started the game, I was intending on making a simple platformer, but the story is largely what is pushing me forward. Again, tremendous detail in your answer. I really, really enjoy that. The third question was, were there any specific moments, mechanics, or ideas that you built around that emotional goal? This dev answered, from a mechanics perspective, I want the player to generally feel empowered through freedom of movement. Unlike games like Dark Souls, which have more emphasis on timing dodges to avoid attacks, I'm designing boss fights and levels around fully utilizing players' movement capabilities to gain the upper hand against enemies. In general, I am hoping to achieve the above feelings by following the game loop. 1. Start off in a safe area. 2. Explore a level and fight a boss that each embodies a specific inner turmoil. 3. Lose abilities and be forced to navigate a section of the game in a slower and more methodical manner. And 4. Return to a safe area to unlock new abilities. Terrific answers, by the way. Every time that I talk about emotion in these games, that's exactly what I'm talking about there, is the specific emotions that you want to communicate in the game. And sometimes games just don't have that. This one does. So tremendous. So I really, really like that. We're going to be doing something a little bit different for this video. Usually I just talk to the camera about some of my feelings on what it was that I experienced. Here in this game, I want to go very, very specific into what I had, what my gameplay was like. As far as I know, this game is still very early in development, but for now, I think it's very important to see what it is that I was going through and how it links to my thoughts. So emotionally, I think the game has a lot of really cool, ambitious ideas. So I personally, I'm very, 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 very interested in emotion in games. And you can see this all over my other channel, Games Over Coffee. I don't upload there anymore, but I talked a whole lot about achieving empathy through game mechanics. I call this empathetic mechanics. You need something more than that. You need to use the medium itself to share those emotions.
Like how movies use visual storytelling?
Exactly. Only in this case, for video games, we use interactive storytelling. We use the game itself to communicate those emotions.
And how do we do that?
Well, that's what this whole thing's about. That's what you and I have talked about for over a year now. Even my first game that I made, called The Door Problem, is completely based on empathetic mechanics. But while I saw a lot of ambition in this game, I did not feel almost any of it. Now, if you notice in the very beginning of this video, I reacted to it with humor. I thought there was a lot of funny stuff in here. And I'm not sure if that was intended now that I read the answers to this. Okay, so the first part here is relatively easy, and I think this is perfect. It definitely felt like it was safe. The whole thing is level, so it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of challenge in my way, as you know, for 2D platforming. So it just feels very easy just to go back and forth. So there's no sense of drama. There's no sense of anything wrong happening. So I think that's great. Up until this point, everything's been pretty lighthearted. We have this person with the question mark on their face talking, and they give these like terms of service, which is just hilarious. So I thought that was really funny. And then even right here, as we go up to the elevator, you can see where it starts talking about the person, who the founder, and then it asks you if you want to learn about the founder. And if you say yes, he jumped out of the elevator. This is obviously pretty funny. So the idea of having turmoil in my mind later on in the game, it feels a little weird because the context right now feels very funny. This guy with a pumpkin on his head, who looks like he came out of a pumpkin. All of it feels like it's a wink wink. The idea that when you grab the mirror that you have to carry it and you're a lot slower, I think that's just really funny. So you're sucked into a mirror and then you're split into two people. And then you fall all the way to the bottom here. And you'll notice, by the way, that the characters are smiling the whole time. They have this big smile on their face. This person, this little bug right here, it's a Tuta bug as far as I know, says press A to ascend. And so you press A and your characters slash. And so basically, after that, then you have a lot of, you have a bunch of fighting that takes place. This is one of the rooms I was talking about where you have a lot of enemies to fight, and it took me a long time to get past it. And then you have another room after this one. And you'll also notice the death scene is very specific. So after I die here, you can see that we have a person crying, right? The white one crying over the black one's death, and it says partner lost in this red thin font. So because of the context, because everything has been pretty funny, this right here seems like it's a little tongue-in-cheek, like it says partner lost and the person is sobbing. You're like, oh no, like it's a cartoony kind of thing. But now I'm second guessing that. I'm wondering if this is supposed to be very serious. And I never felt serious about this. I'm not saying that you can't mix serious and comedy together, but I think it's a lot harder. And it certainly seems from the beginning, since we have so much humor in the game, that any parts that are kind of darker feel like dark humor as opposed to just drama. At least to me, that's how it feels. Okay, so I actually beat the boss finally. It's kind of funny that you talked about the Dark Souls, about how your game is definitely not like Dark Souls. This game, this boss fight at least, to me was very much like Dark Souls. I had to memorize every attack. I had to memorize where exactly the safe areas were when I was going. I never felt like I had enough control of my character to just launch attacks at any time. I think if you wanted to make the player feel very powerful, that they should be able to exert control whenever they want. That's kind of the thing about Dark Souls, about why it feels so limiting, is because you can't attack the enemies just whenever, right? You really have to wait it out because they're very, very dangerous. This one is also very, very dangerous, this boss. They can kill you pretty easily. Sometimes when the boss hits you, the player gets knocked back a whole lot. There's a whole lot of knockback, which means that you have to go back to the boss in order to hit it, and you can't get there in time. So it feels like a lot of this stuff is pushing the player away from control, right? The player does not have a whole lot of control. When I'm playing the boss, I feel like I'm having a dance with him, right? That I'm trying to understand where he's going to go next, what's going to happen next, and we keep going back and forth. And I have to get into the rhythm. Like the game is really forcing me to play the way that it is in order for me to do any kind of damage to the boss. As opposed to the other parts of the game, which feel a lot more open, this boss at least feels like it's really, really constrained. But just before this boss, there's an emotion part I want to talk about, and that's this part. In this dialogue, when you come over to the Tutubug, you talk to it, and it says some pretty dark stuff, some stuff that says, I've been trapped with no path of escape. The light at the end of the cave is nothing but a mirage. And it's like funny at this moment. To me, it feels darkly funny because it's talking about these things that are just suddenly so traumatic. He says the word about ascension and talks about how all of his other buddies have died. That's what he wants too. He also wants death. But the way that he talks about death is ascension. So in the very beginning there, when you killed that first Tutubug, which seems like a mechanical joke, that ascension is actually what he's talking about. And they're talking about like dying in order to go, I guess, to heaven or something like that. He wants to ascend like all of his buddies who you've killed. And to me, again, because we've had this context of funny stuff, it feels like he's kind of this nihilistic kind of person where he's like, I want to die too, like everyone else. And to me, it feels funny. And I think the reason why I interpreted humor from all this, specifically this one, was probably because the breakneck speed at which we switch emotions, where it feels really funny beforehand. It feels very fun-loving. This whole thing is like I'm jumping around, I'm launching attacks. Whenever my partner dies, he like cries, and the whole thing, turns very dark all of a sudden. It feels like we're switching really, really fast from one emotion to another. So to me, it feels like it's all the same emotion, that we're not really telling a story that's going in between different emotions, but rather we're just going up and down and up and down. So once we get past that boss and we go into this room, we have this really hilarious looking room that everything is like big gold and gaudy, and there's pictures of whoever on here along with the picture of the building itself. And then you have this big Shovel Knight looking dude who only speaks in capital letters. And again, it feels like a joke. And so here he banishes you to wherever this area. And now this is where I want to talk a little bit more about the emotion here. So this part, the game is supposed to evoke a sense of unease. And I think the way that you're trying to do that, developer, I think you're trying to show that through the visuals right here, right? Everything is very dark. But our characters, I just now realized actually they have different faces now, which is kind of neat. And then you see Tutubugs that are locked in here. Now you can see me jumping a lot right here, and that's because my mechanics are no longer working. I don't have my moves anymore. And so now we have like these creepy looking things right here. Then we have this little thing that looked pretty funny to me. So now everything is dark, and We don't have our fighting mechanics anymore. Now what we're doing is we're kind of thrust into what a situation that kind of feels, it kind of seems like it should be a horror kind of situation, because horror is an emotion that someone gets from not comprehending fully things that are in front of them, or they feel threatened at least. The reason why a lot of horror games take place in the darkness, when you look into the darkness, you're imagining some sort of threat that's somehow going to stop you or somehow, do something to you. This is one of the reasons why the game Slender Man can be like actually scary, even though the game itself looks like an N64 game, like it looks really funny. But when you play the game, you feel really tense, and it's because you know that there's a lingering threat and you can't see it. It's like nebulous. It's this kind of threat that just exists in your mind. It's not just the darkness that makes it that way, though. Now, the darkness does, because we're humans and the way that we see everything, because everything's usually lit, darkness usually is the thing that we think about when we think about things that are unseen threats. But when applied to games, if it's not obscuring a threat, then there's no real need for it. And so what this is doing right now in this game, this particular scene, is that it's just creating a mood. And so, yeah, it does feel dark. It does not feel scary, and it doesn't feel like unease either to me. And in fact, these guys, these little enemy guys, they make this noise when they see you. And the noise that they make is, huh? And so it feels goofy. It feels kind of like a cartoon. And so again, we're in this, I don't know if this is supposed to make me feel unease. I don't feel unease right now. I feel like I'm laughing. Again, it feels like it's a funny thing. So the guy that goes, huh? And then he starts running towards you. At this point, I don't know if this was just completely my fault or whatever, but I jumped onto him, and then he falls over. And I don't know if that was because I hurt him or because that's just the way that these guys attack. And so because of that, I felt like, oh, I have power over these guys, and I kept trying to hit them. But it turns out they were hurting me, and I didn't know they were hurting me because I can't actually see my health at this point because the characters change color, and because I'm in darkness, I can't see my color. So I just figured I wasn't doing any damage to them, so I just kept going. And again, that's another one of those points right there where it seems like there should be some sort of unease happening here because, again, there's a lot of darkness, but it wasn't. And the whole thing kind of felt like maybe a race, like a little speed run little area. Right here, I was trying to figure out how do I get forward, but, there was a little more stealth that was needed, but it didn't really feel like I was in any danger. I always felt pretty much in control of it all. Now, I will say something that I think worked really, really, really well was the last part of the game. So at least, I don't know if this is actually the last part or not. It doesn't seem like I can progress any more from here. But from this point, when you get into this little cabin here, because that goddamn boss took so much effort from me, this next section was really, really interesting. When you get to this guy, you learn something called a form thing. And so now I'm playing as the boss, and I have all of his own little attacks. So that felt incredible. After that boss had given me so much grief, it was amazing to play as the boss. One thing I didn't know about the laser is that I could hold it to shoot a really long laser, which I thought was really cool. And also I could change its direction and everything. These things aren't ever taught in the game, so I just kind of discovered them on my own. And I think that's the last part of the game. So as far as the emotions are concerned in the game, it never feels like I'm feeling the emotions as they're happening. Any kind of turmoil that was said by any of the characters in here, like the one Tuttabug, but to me, it just felt like I was laughing at it. I didn't feel any type of mental illness that was happening around me. I think those are really cool goals to have. And I think you should check out a lot of my videos from that other channel when I talk about how to put specific emotions into your game by making the player feel it. There's something I call zeroth person perspective, right? Where a person just, when they're playing a game, they're automatically experiencing everything in front of them. And so in order to make them feel a specific way, you're going to have to make them experience those things. One of the games that I bring up all the time that does this is Depression Quest. Depression Quest literally will take choices away from the player and let them seep in that feeling of not being able to do the things that they want to do. There's also a game like Papers, Please, which puts the player into that endless kind of bureaucratic nonsense role. Reality is just really just absurd at that moment, and you're feeling the absurd nature of government. In fact, one of the games that uses this kind of thing in an ironic way is Hotline Miami. And if you haven't played Hotline Miami and you don't want me to spoil it, then you can skip this part. But in Hotline Miami, they give the player this feeling of control where the player can instantly kill quite a lot of people all at once. It's not a super easy game to do, but it feels like it's a challenging game, right? A game where you get combos from taking people's heads off and stuff. Your character's really violent every time that he kills everybody, and it feels like what you're doing is a good thing, and you find out that you're the bad guy, and you're right afterwards. So when you think about showing emotions in your game, unless you were trying to have like a funny kind of way of looking at it, I would say look at what the player is feeling. How are they feeling when they're playing the game? And you might already be doing this with your survey. I haven't checked out your survey, so I should check that out. Ask the player how they're feeling during certain times and see how it is that they respond to certain parts of the game. And when I mean respond, I mean don't ask them, hey, how did you feel when you played this part of the game? Because they won't tell you. Usually whenever a player plays a game, they'll play the game and then whatever they felt during that section, they'll discount and then fill in what they think they should know. I know this because I've done it. I've play tested. I know people do it. It's just kind of the way that a lot of us operate. Sometimes people are really, really honest, but most of the time you don't get that kind of thing. So I think some of the best things that you can do when you're play testing is to have like a recorded type of video from the person who's playing the game, so you can see, certain times that they may have hesitated to do certain things, and then you can interpret that as some of the feelings that they had. And then maybe you can ask them also if they felt anything, and then, compare it with the gameplay to see if that's actually what they felt. So that's about everything I have to say. If you are a regular watcher of this channel, the next game that we're going to cover is called Shroombot. No, it's not. It's called Credit Farm by Shroombot. Shroombot is the developer. I'm not sure what the game is. I haven't played it yet, but we will talk about it. We're going to see it next time. There's also a Discord. Check out the Discord, link in the description. So that's everything I have to say. I will talk to you guys later. Peace.